the nation. Collectively, we have now planted well over 25 billion trees across the country. This impact could be equated to removing 64 million gasoline-powered cars from the roads for a whole year. For my country, investment in environment protection is not a charity. It is driven by enlightened self-interest. For us in Ethiopia, environmental protection is about everything we are as a society. It is about our ability to feed ourselves. It's about our ability to conserve water and other precious resources. It is about our ability to preserve peace between adjoining communities. It is about our survival as a nation. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, while Ethiopia's economy has been challenged by the COVID-19 pandemic, a drought, an internal conflict, and the impact of the Russia-Ukraine crisis, we have nevertheless remained resilient as a nation. Our homegrown economic reform program has also helped us to persevere. Through this reform program that has enabled the opening up of the economy to competition, some of the major service sectors that have been closed to foreign investment for several decades, such as telecom and finance, are being progressively opened. We know the COVID-19 pandemic and the current global commodity shortage hurts public finance everywhere. Forced to spend on tackling the pandemic while tax revenues collapsed, most of our countries piled up unsustainable debt. Now that the pandemic is over, nearly all of us want to put our economy back on growth trajectory. But this will not happen without sufficient restructuring to make our external debt sustainable. I therefore want to reaffirm our collective call for a fast and predictable global framework for debt restructuring that is conducive to accelerating sustainable, inclusive, green growth in Africa. Excellencies, Africa today is leading voice for better world. Africa are increasingly resolving their differences by peaceful means. The African continent is fast-tracking the establishment and implementation of a rules-based system on trade governance that promises to create the world's largest free trade area. African countries are engaged in environmental conservation, reforestation, and a massive investment in the generation of clean energy from hydro sources. In short, Africa is leading the world in areas that matters for all humanity, and it is time for Africa's leadership role to be recognized and institutionalized. I would like to use this opportunity to lend my voice yet again for Africa to be represented on the UN Security Council with at least one permanent seat and double non-permanent seats. Thank you. Moreover, Africa also needs to have proportionate representation at the G7, the G20, and similar global forums. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on this same occasion last year, I called upon all of us to tackle Africa's typically negative portrayal by the global media. I stressed the need for Africa to tell her own story and not allow others to tell it in the service of their own interest. In this respect, please allow me to reiterate yet again the need to establish an African Union continental media house. Until Africa tells her own stories, her image will remain distorted. A distortion that affects not just how others view us, but also how we view ourselves. We owe it to ourselves and to our children that Africa's truths needs to be told as they are, untainted with external interests and biases. Excellencies, let me conclude by thanking you once again for standing with Ethiopia in our time of need. Ethiopia and Ethiopians are appreciative of the Pan-African solidarity that was on display in those difficult moments. Together, we prevailed. God bless Ethiopia. God bless Africa. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Your Excellencies, I now have the honor to invite Mr. Ahmed Abugate, Secretary General of the League of Arab States, to make a statement.
فخامة الرئيس مكسال، رئيس جمهورية السنغال، دولة رئيس وزراء أثيوبيا أبي أحمد، أصحاب الفخامة رؤساء الدول والحكومات ورؤساء الوفود، صديقي العزيز أنطونيو غوتيريش، سكرتير عام الأمم المتحدة، معالي السيد موسى فيكي، رئيس مفوضية الاتحاد الأفريقي، السيدات والسادة، اسمحوا لي في البداية أن أعبر عن عميق اعتزازي بالتحدث أمامكم في هذه القمة الهامة، وأتوجه بخالص الشكر والتقدير لزميلي السيد موسى فيكي على دعوته الكريمة التي تعكس الالتزام الراسخ بتمكين الشراكة المؤسسية بين المنظمتين والحرص المتبادل على استمرار التقليد المتبع بقيام كل منظمة بدعوة نظيرتها إلى مخاطبة قمتها السنوية. كما أتوجه بخالص التحية إلى فخامة الرئيس مكسال على رئاسته الناجحة للاتحاد الأفريقي، واسمحوا لي أن أهنئ أيضا فخامة الرئيس عثمان غزالي على توليه رئاسة الاتحاد، وأثق في أن قيادته الشخصية ستساهم كثيرا في الارتقاء بمستوى شراكتنا وتمتينها دعما لأولويات دولنا ونصرة لقضايا شعوبنا. تنعقد هذه القمة في ظل وضع دولي دقيق ومضطرب فرضته الحرب الروسية الأوكرانية والتبعات التي نجمت عنها من تفاقم لأزمتي الغذاء والطاقة، واللتين تعاني منهما الكثير من الدول العربية والأفريقية. ولا شك أن هذه التحديات الخطيرة التي تواجه دولنا، خاصة على الصعيد الاقتصادي وارتفاع معدلات الفقر جراء التضخم المصحوب والركود، تدفعنا إلى تقاسم الخبرات وتبادل الرؤى حول أفضل السبل للتعامل مع هذه الأوضاع الجيوسياسية والاقتصادية الضاغطة. إن التعاون العربي الإفريقي ومنذ تأسيسه في عام 1977 يستند إلى مصالح مشتركة وتاريخ طويل ووجهات نظر متقاربة للكثير من القضايا العالمية، وما من شك في أن المفتاح الحقيقي لعلاقات ناجحة ومثمرة هو الإدراك المتبادل من كل طرف لشواغل الطرف الآخر وتطلعاته، والرغبة الصادقة في الوصول إلى معادلة تحقق المصلحة للجميع عبر توظيف الإمكانات الهائلة الكامنة في هذه الشراكة في شتى المجالات لما فيه الخير للشعوب العربية والإفريقية. إن هذه القمة اليوم تنعقد تحت شعار تسريع تنفيذ منطقة التجارة الحرة القارية الإفريقية، وهو موضوع يتفق مع أهداف وأولويات الجامعة العربية. فمنطقة التجارة الحرة العربية الكبرى تعد من أهم خطوات تفعيل التكامل الاقتصادي العربي، وأود التأكيد هنا على رغبتنا في الارتقاء بمستوى علاقات التعاون والتكامل التكامل العربي والإفريقي، خاصة أن هناك مشروعا لتطوير منطقة تجارة حرة عربية إفريقية في خطة العمل العربية الإفريقية المشتركة. إننا نحتاج إلى مواصلة العمل وتكثيفه في المرحلة المقبلة. فمن المنتظر أن تعقد القمة العربية الإفريقية الخامسة العام الجاري في المملكة العربية السعودية، ولا شك أن التحديات والاستحقاقات المتعلقة بهذه الشراكة تتطلب عملا جادا وتقتضي جهدا متضافرا في التحضير الجيد لأعمال هذه القمة. إن ثمة حاجة لمراجعة خطة العمل العربية الإفريقية المشتركة مراجعة نهائية تمهيدا لاعتمادها، ونحتاج كذلك إلى تكثيف جهودنا لتعزيز عمل العديد من برامج التعاون العربي الإفريقي القائمة، مثل المعهد الثقافي العربي الإفريقي والمعرض التجاري العربي الإفريقي، فضلا عن العمل من أجل استكمال الخطوات اللازمة لإنشاء الصندوق العربي الإفريقي للحد من الكوارث والمركز العربي الإفريقي لتبادل المعلومات حول الهجرة، بالإضافة إلى تنظيم الاجتماع الرابع لوزراء الزراعة العرب والأفارقة. من ناحية أخرى، لا ينبغي أن تطغى الأزمات العالمية المستجدة على المشكلات والأزمات التي تعاني منها بالفعل منطقتان العربية والإفريقية. إنني أدعو في هذا الصدد إلى تعزيز التعاون فيما بيننا لدعم الصومال ومساندة حكومته في جهودها المثمرة في مكافحة الإرهاب ودحر حركة الشباب الإرهابية وتثبيت دعائم الأمن والاستقرار ومواجهة الآثار المدمرة للجفاف، والعمل على إنجاح خطط التنمية الوطنية التي يتولى تنفيذها فخامة الرئيس حسن شيخ محمود. ونتطلع كذلك إلى مواصلة جهودنا التكاملية لمساندة جزر القمر وكل ما يصب في دعم استقرارها وخطط التطوير السياسي والاقتصادي التي أطلقها فخامة الرئيس عثمان غزالي. كما نؤكد على التزامنا في الوقوف إلى جوار السودان ومساندته من أجل استكمال استحقاقات الفترة الانتقالية، خاصة من خلال الاتفاق الإطاري الذي تم توقيعه في ديسمبر الماضي. ونثمن في هذا الخصوص مشاركة الاتحاد الإفريقي في رعاية عملية وساطة فعالة من خلال آلية العمل الثلاثية. وفيما يتعلق بالوضع في ليبيا والذي يمثل أولوية مشتركة ومهمة لنا كشركاء،
go into a political settlement and to overcome the challenges that impede the elections and the achievement of political stability that can preserve the unity of the country and sovereignty, and that should end the militias there and to promote good neighborhood policies. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Palestinians are suffering from the occupation, an occupation that can only be described as apartheid. In the last few months, the Israeli violations have increased in a way that is going to lead to an explosion in the occupied territories. Unfortunately, this is taking place as the international community watches, an international community that seems to have given up its responsibility to promote a two-state solution, with the existence of a right-wing Israeli government that does not believe in a solution and seeks to occupy the land through settlement, the expropriation of land, and the forced expulsion of citizens, as is the case on Jerusalem, a Jerusalem that is facing a plan to change its demographic balance. We hail the principled position of the African Union to support the Palestinian cause and the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people to end the Israeli occupation of its territories and the establishment of an independent state. I particularly hail the efforts made by the chairperson of the AU Commission for his support to the Palestinian people. Africa shall remain committed to supporting the struggle of the Palestinian people. At the end, I wish to seize this opportunity to say that we look forward to the 5th Afro-Arab Summit in November this year, and this will take place, God willing, in Saudi Arabia.
بين الأمانة العامة للجامعة العربية ومفوضية الاتحاد الإفريقي والدولة المضيفة، وستفضي هذه القمة كما نتطلع جميعا ونتمنى إلى تحقيق نقلة نوعية في شراكتنا الاستراتيجية.
In a way that reflects the historic ties and the common interests. This will be the beginning of working together for the benefit of Afro-Arab populations. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, may I now invite His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, United Nations Secretary General, to deliver his statement.
Your Excellency and dear friend, President Macky Sall, Your Excellency and dear friend, Chairperson Safaki Mohammad, dear Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, dear colleague Secretary General Abu Ghait, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. Let me begin by recognizing President Macky Sall for his leadership as chair over the last year. President Assoumani, we look forward to working with you as incoming chairperson. And I want to commend all of you for uniting around the theme of an integrated, prosperous and peaceful Africa. The African Union is taking inspiring steps to help realize the enormous potential of this great continent. Africa is poised for progress. Agenda 2063, the decade of women's financial and economic inclusion, the continent's abundance of natural resources, and its greatest advantage of all, its people, representing diverse range of cultures and languages. In particular, I am pleased to see your strong focus on job creation and the enormous potential of the African continental free trade area. This represents a truly transformative pathway to job creation and new sources of prosperity for Africans, especially for the youth. And I applaud the exciting progress that has been made so far and the commitment of President Issoufou as champion of this important effort. The United Nations is proud to be your partner and to work together. The ties between the African Union and the United Nations have never been stronger. But I also recognize the enormous tests that Africa, and indeed our world, is facing on virtually every front. I recently addressed the UN General Assembly on the multiple interlinked challenges confronting our world, greater than any in our lifetimes. And in many ways, the people of Africa are bearing the brunt of this crisis. A dysfunctional and unfair global financial system that is failing developing countries when they need it most. The deep inequalities in the availability of resources for the recovery from the pandemic. A cost of living crisis exacerbated by the consequences of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Climate chaos that the people of Africa did very little to cause, that is whipping up floods and deadly droughts, putting communities and lives at risk and displacing millions. And peace and security threats, often involving interests and profits far beyond the continent's borders. Excellencies, across all these areas the message is clear: Africa needs action. First, economic action. Africa is rich with potential, but it's not rich in global support. investing in Africa pathways to prosperity requires finance, and developing countries are repeatedly left in the lurch. The global financial system routinely denies them debt relief and concessional financing while charging extortionate interest rates. As a result, vital systems are starved of investment, from health and education to green technology, social protection, and the creation of new sustainable jobs. Meanwhile, women and girls are still not receiving the support and the investment they need, and in the classroom, in the workplace, in civil society, and across political systems. African countries cannot invest in these critical areas and climb the development ladder with one hand tied behind their backs. I've called for a new Bretton Woods moment to radically every decision mechanism and process should be centered in the needs of developing countries. They should have a far greater voice in global institutions, including financial institutions. Security Council, Bretton Woods system are typical examples where Africa is dramatically underrepresented. We need a new debt architecture that provides debt relief and restructuring to vulnerable countries, including middle-income countries, while providing immediate debt suspension and write-downs to countries in need. Multilateral development banks should transform their business model and accept a new approach to risk. And this includes massively leveraging their funds to attract greater flows of private capital into your countries. And it means scaling up guarantees and adopting first-loss positions in coalitions of financial institutions to support developing countries, particularly in Africa. I will also continue pushing G20 leaders for an SDG stimulus to support the Global South. The SDG Summit in September must be a breakthrough moment in delivering support for developing countries and reforming a broken global financial system. I will continue standing with you in this fight. Second, Africa needs climate action. The brutal injustice of climate change is on full display with every flood, drought, famine, and heat wave endured on this continent. Its most devastating impacts. Meanwhile, several African countries are demonstrating strong leadership on climate. This includes Kenya's green economy strategy, the effort to protect the tropical forests of the Congo, South Africa's Just Transition Energy Partnership, and the EU's ambitious green stimulus program. I'm encouraged by the leading role of the African small island states, role they are playing in championing the Great Blue Wall Initiative. It is clear the world must decarbonize, but we need to ensure that the transition to renewable energy is a just transition, particularly in Africa, where energy access and development challenges must be properly addressed. This includes wider access to technologies like battery storage systems, components, and raw materials. The upcoming transboundary battery and electric vehicle value chain initiative hosted by DRC and Zambia is a good example. But all these efforts must be matched by a tidal wave of support from developed countries. They must deliver on the $100 billion promised to developing countries. They must deliver on the loss and damage fund agreed to at the last COP in Sharm el-Sheikh. They must deliver on doubling adaptation finance. They must deliver on replenishing the Green Climate Funds. And deliver on plans for early warning systems to protect every person in the world within 5 years, including the 6 in 10 Africans who lack these systems. In September, I will convene a Climate Ambition Summit in our pathway to COP28 in December, where governments, businesses and civil society will demonstrate their commitment to reach net zero. Et troisièmement, l'Afrique a besoin d'action pour la paix. L'ONU est fière d'être un partenaire de paix en Afrique. Qu'il s'agisse de nos forces hybrides et programmes conjoints, du renforcement des processus électoraux et des
from the reinforcement of electoral processes to the peaceful transfer of power, of our efforts of maintaining and consolidating peace, or our joint initiatives aimed at putting an end to terrorism in the continent. But our work becomes more complex every year. Terrorism and insecurity are aggravating and the conflicts are more numerous. I'm profoundly concerned by the surge of violence of armed groups observed recently in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo and the progression of terrorist groups in the Sahel and elsewhere. In some countries, democratic developments are evaporating. The peace agreement with in Africa, in Ethiopia, and here I congratulate Abiy Ahmed for the success of this process and the process of in Libya and the peace agreements in South Sudan and Central African Republic are hope for the future. We should continue struggling for peace. However, the mechanisms of peace are oscillating and the system is not as flexible and efficient as it should be. The new agenda for peace that we propose should give a new breath to multilateralism and reinforce our peace operations in the world. We need to identify the profound causes of conflicts and prevent the seeds of war. We need to develop a global approach for prevention that establishes links between peace, sustainable development, climate action, and human rights, and that is based on a larger participation of women and youths. We are determined to intensify our work with the African Union to promote the structures of democratic open structures. We will continue reinforcing and improving our peace maintaining operations. In the same time, we support the creation of a new generation of robust missions to impose peace and operations to fight against terrorism, as led by the African Union and mandated by the Peace and Security Council by virtue of Chapter 7, as well as a guaranteed and foreseeable financing. And we should continue to reinforce our collaboration on the initiatives of peace initiatives as we did at the level of the independent high-level group for security and development in the Sahel. I shall endeavor with you to silence the guns and to create the conditions for peace for 1.4 billion people living in Africa. Excellencies, the 21st century has everything to be the century of Africa. The United Nations is determined to work with each one of you to liberate this tremendous potential and to overcome the obstacles on our way. Let's act for Africa. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General.
Le secrétaire général, je voudrais à présent inviter son Excellence Dr. Mohamed Shitaï, Premier ministre de l'État de la Palestine, de bien vouloir prononcer son allocution.
والمعالي رؤساء الوفود,
heads of delegations, Excellency Macky Sall, President of the Republic of Senegal, Chairman, President of the African Union, my dear brother Moussa Faki Mohammed, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Your Excellency Abiy Ahmed, Prime Minister of friendly Ethiopia, Your Excellency Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres, my dear brother, Secretary General of the League of Arab States, Mr. Ahmed Abul Ghaith. I'm very delighted and I'm very pleased and honored to address you on behalf of the President Mahmoud Abbas and on behalf of Palestine, its people and its struggle. And I would like to express my congratulations to President Macky Sall for his wisdom in leading the African Union during his chairmanship, and would like to congratulate President Othmani for being elected. Dear leaders of Africa, I would like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to address you here on behalf of Palestine, and my call from this rostrum is a message from Africa that it is standing with the rights of the Palestinian people, those inalienable rights. From this rostrum, the rostrum of Africa, the rostrum of the African Union, the rostrum of friendship among peoples, the rostrum of African leaders, the rostrum of vision and message to the peoples of Africa and of the world, the rostrum of free Africa, which has defeated colonialism and has enlightened a brilliant future for its sons, daughters, and its people. Africa, which has defeated the racist regime of apartheid based on discrimination and hatred. Today, Africa is proud and fond of its unity in order to allow free trade and free movement far from any military or tariff barriers. Would like to hail you and salute you for standing with Palestine. And we in Palestine have always been together in the same front with Africa and the liberation movements of Africa. And we were very happy and delighted when Africa achieved its liberation. And now our presence here with you is a reaffirmation of working together for the prosperity of Africa in order to be at bay from poverty and unemployment. And we are standing with you here in order to strengthen Arab-African dialogue, which we are part of. In Palestine, we against colonialism, but you have preceded us towards liberation, and we are still on our way fighting the last occupation that is the settlement occupation of Israel. This colonizer, which has is taking a new form of terrorism through the policy of shoot to kill, and also more confiscation of land and the transformation of its owners into refugees, and more Israeli settlements which have been officialized by the Israeli government, and more aggressions against Christian and Islamic shrines in the city of Al-Quds and Al-Khalil. The present Israeli government has called on Israelis, on settlers, to take up arms and weapons in order for killing to be easier. It has enacted racist laws which facilitates more colonization settlement and the setting up of a racist regime, roads for Israelis and for settlers and roads for Palestinians. Homes settlements are being built up, schools for settlers only. That is an apartheid regime. Through practice and law, they would build up a home for a settler and would demolish another home for a Palestinian. Ladies and gentlemen, these colonizers are stealing the souls of our children. During recently, 50 Palestinians were killed.
هذه الحكومة التي تسرق الأرض والجغرافيا وتقتل الإنسان وتبعد الديموغرافيا وتسرق المال وتزور الرواية وتحاصر أهلنا في قطاع غزة، وهي بكل هذا تنتهك حقوق الإنسان والقانون الدولي وتشرعن القتل وإبعاد الفلسطينيين من بيوتهم بعد هدمها. السيد الرئيس، إن السياسة الإسرائيلية الحالية مبنية على supremacy of racial segregation, and in its statement, the current Israeli government explicitly stated that the Jewish people have an exclusive right to all parts of the land of Israel, i.e. in reference to the land of Palestine. What does this mean? This means more settlements. This means squeezing the Palestinians into Bantustans. This means institutionalization of racism. This means Israeli settler colonial regime is in nature a regime with a clear apartheid policies and practice with a legal system. This means the Judaization of the land and the de-Palestinization of Palestine. This means violation of international convention on the elimination of all forms of racial discrimination and amounts to crimes under apartheid convention and the Rome Statute of the ICC. Ladies and gentlemen, quiet diplomacy does not yield with Israel. All what is needed is loud voice and action. Let's make the Israeli occupation to Palestine costly. This occupation makes profit. Israel takes our land for free. Israel takes our water for free. Israel kills our children in a not accountable way. 6,451 Palestinians are in Israeli prisons. Israel keeps the bodies of dead Palestinians in Israeli jails until they finish the sentence. This has never happened all through history, to keep dead bodies in refrigerators, not to enjoy a dignified way of burial. This has never happened in any part of the world. We have adopted a peaceful resistance, passive resistance. On the ground, our people are fully mobilized, and our people are not silent. And we are there to break the status quo, which Israel is every single day trying to deteriorate this status quo. And we are working on the internationalization of the conflict. Tomorrow, Mr. Secretary General, the Security Council will vote on a proposal submitted by the Arab bloc at the United Nations calling for Israel to refrain from all unilateral acts that is taking against our people, and calling upon Israel to commit itself to and respect the signed agreements between us and them. We know that the United States will veto this. But for how long can the international community continue to be silent on these crimes? It is time that we hold Israel responsible. It is time that we all stand solid and submit proposal to hold Israel responsible at International Criminal Court as well as at the International Court of Justice. Mr. Chairman, we live in a political vacuum, and this political vacuum is very dangerous. We need to fill this political vacuum. We need to bring to life the Arab Peace Initiative that did call for the withdrawal of Israeli forces from the Arab-occupied territories since 1967. And the Palestinians, the Arabs, and the Muslims are ready for normalizing relation with Israel on the basis of the Arab Peace Initiative. It's not only that. The systematic destruction of two states needs to be stopped. And I hope that we all send a clear message to the Israelis that this is not going to take them anywhere. The demographic balance in Palestine is in our favor. The first time since 1948, the creation of the State of Israel, the Palestinians are more in numbers than the Israelis. There are 7 million Israelis there in historical Palestine. There are 7,350,000 Palestinian Muslims and Christians. A minority Israelis will be governing the affairs of majority Palestinians. This will lead us to a situation in which one can call it the South Africanization of the Palestinian question under the regime of apartheid. We call for a peaceful negotiation based on a two-state solution. And that is where we stand, and that is what the community. Mr. Chairman, we're working to unite our internal front. Thanks to Algeria for all the effort that they have conducted to bring Palestinians together. Thanks for Egypt for all what they have done. Thanks for Africa for hosting me. Thanks for all of you who stand solid for peace and justice. Long live the Palestinian-African friendship. Long live the Arab-African friendship. God bless you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we have now reached the apex of our continental organization, and it is time to listen to the chairperson, entrusted with the core responsibility of steering the affairs of our union. He leads the Assembly of the Union, the highest organ. The Assembly decides on all policies of our union. It establishes the priorities of the union, decides on the annual program of the union, and monitors the implementation of its policies and decisions. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, may I now humbly invite His Excellency President Macky Sall of Senegal and Chairperson of the African Union to address the Assembly. Your Excellency, sir.
Excellences, Mesdames, Messieurs les chefs d'État et chefs de gouvernement, Monsieur le Secrétaire général des Nations Unies, cher Antonio Guterres, Monsieur le Premier ministre de la Palestine, Dr Mohamed Taïr, Monsieur le Président de la Commission de l'Union africaine, cher Mohamed Moussa Faki Mohamed, Monsieur le Secrétaire général de la Ligue arabe, Monsieur Ahmed Abdoul Gaïd, distingués invités, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs de délégation, honorables invités spéciaux, je voudrais distinguer parmi eux M. Charles Michel, président du Conseil européen, ainsi que M. Antonio Costa, Premier ministre du Portugal. Je voudrais avant toute chose dire au Premier ministre palestinien que nous avons entendu votre plaidoyer vibrant.
Plea. And from this rostrum, I want to reiterate our commitment, the commitment of Africa to the peaceful solution with two states living side by side within the secure and internationally recognized borders, and Palestine should have its state just like the state of Israel. Excellency, on your behalf and on my own behalf, I would like to thank the government of Ethiopia for its convivial welcome and all the measures taken for our summit. I want to thank all the colleagues, the heads of delegation and invited guests present. We are holding our meetings while our countries continue to suffer frontally the effects and consequences of climate change, the health crisis, unprecedented health crisis, which has plunged the whole world in a very dangerous infernal sequence, and nobody can predict why, when, and how it will end. The rise and spread of terrorism on the continent. Thank you, Mr. Secretary General, for your commitment. I hope the Security Council will take heed of what you say. The recrudescence of unconstitutional change of government. We need to commend the organization of free and fair election which entrenches democracy in African countries. During my term, I endeavored to support the settlement of disputes and support the political transitions, and with your support, and particularly with the support of the Commission and the regional economic communities and the regional mechanisms. We need to note that rendering the continent peaceful remains an objective to be attained. I urge the implementation, the honoring of the commitment we made at the extraordinary session held in Malabo, and to make operational the African Standby Force. Establish a unit that will fight against terrorism in a more consistent manner, in a more foreseeable manner, so against the scourge of terrorism. This fight, as I said, at the 77th session of the General Assembly of the United Nations, it is also the responsibility of the Security Council and the collective, which is the collective security, because terrorism in Africa is a threat to international peace and security. I am happy that the UN Secretary General has made this commitment, which always he has made, in fact, so that the UN Security Council can finance in an absolute manner the fight against terrorism in Africa. And as he did elsewhere, the Council should be better committed and more committed to fight against terrorism in Africa with robust mandate, as you have said, Mr. Secretary General, and adequate financing. In any case,
the challenge of peace and security and stability of the continent engages us and commits us to find peaceful solutions to our disputes so that we can devote our efforts to the economic and social development. And I think the steps taken by Ethiopia is to be commended. I want also to thank President of Angola as regards the dispute between the DRC and Rwanda. With geopolitics, I think there is a historical opportunity that is opening its doors to us. That is to close the doors of conflicts and open the doors of African solutions. We have all the potential with a continent of 30 million square kilometers or more than 1.4 billion inhabitants, which has an abundance of all types of resource, cannot be condemned to remain lagging behind the whole world. The development of Africa is within our grasp. But to do that, we need to devote more time to the economic and social development agenda of the continent. We had already this year updated this summit this agenda on the summit on industrialization and economic diversification of the continent and acceleration of the implementation of the AFCFTA, the positive masculinity, and stop the violence against women and girls, and President Tshisekedi, whom I would like to pay tribute, and also to agriculture, food security, and finally on the financing of infrastructures. This theme reminds us of the urgent needs that we need to meet so that we can realize the Africa that we want for ourselves, for our children, and for the future generations. With the persistence of violence done to women and girls on the continent, and the fact that we are lagging behind in infrastructures, I call upon the Union to take urgent decisions for the implementation of the conclusions of the meetings of Dakar on these two themes, that is positive masculinity and infrastructure development. With regard to the second conference in Dakar on food security, co-organized by Senegal and African Development Bank from 25 to 27 January, that is to feeding Africa food sovereignty and resilience. The record participation at the highest level of heads of state and government made it a summit which is action-oriented for an Africa which at least gives itself the necessary means to feed itself and also contribute to feed the world. On the basis of this priority program, many countries have already signed with bilateral and multilateral partners compacts that will stimulate agricultural production, food processing, and trade in agricultural produce for an amount of $36 billion and $10 billion which have been mobilized by the African Development Bank. I express our grateful thanks to our multilateral and bilateral partners present at that meeting and for their commitment and their contribution. I sincerely thank our brother, President Akini Adesina, the President of the African Development Bank, for the enthusiasm and the leadership with which he continues to mobilize African Development Bank in order to unleash the agricultural potential of the continent and also to make it stand against the outside world. So this K2 is a witness, and we can rely on him for the actual mobilization of resources. In order to ensure an adequate follow-up of that conference, I recommend that the Assembly should endorse the Dakar Declaration on Food Sovereignty and Resilience and instruct the Commission to work for its implementation in cooperation with our continental bank, the African Development Bank, ADB. It will be appropriate, Excellencies, to integrate in the same process the follow-up of the joint declaration on food security, which was adopted at the US-Africa. Well, I'm talking of United States of Africa. We will move towards that, says the President. In fact, I've set up a task force led by the former Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Haile Desalegn Mariam, and whom I would like to congratulate. We together will strive, Masura, as well as Madam Vera Songwe, who was at the ECA. So this team will work and will continue to work with the former Prime Minister Mayaki, who has been appointed by the chairperson of the Commission under the authority of President Azali. We can attain the objectives of that Washington Declaration to work with the Americans, and it will be, maybe in the short term, to ensure for the African countries the supplies of cereals and fertilizer the normal conditions, market conditions. That is in the short term. To this end, we can use the ATEX platform in cooperation with African Bank, and I want to commend its president, who is very much committed to this process in order to facilitate the transactions in the purchase of cereals and fertilizer. In the medium and long term, this declaration of Washington commits us to work with the American side and other partners, European partners particularly, in order to improve the agricultural outputs of the continent in all its aspects, including infrastructure. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Africa we want is also an Africa that thinks for itself, an Africa that knows what it wants and what it is worth, an Africa which is fully integrated in world governance, global governance, and which is engaged with the partners in a relational ethics which is rethought, reinvented, and re-engineered, which is respecting the diversity of the cultures and the various aspects of Africa. This is the plea, the advocacy that I made on your behalf at the Brussels African Union, European Union in Brussels, in Paris, at the G7, TICAD 8 in Tunis, at the UN General Assembly, and COP27 Sharm el-Sheikh at the G20 summit in Bali, and the second summit, US-Africa in Washington. At all these stages, I reaffirm that there must be deep changes, work together, which demands a new way of thinking, a new way of acting as partners, mutually respecting their differences and their similarities. On the global governance, it is clear that the UN Security Council has not made any change or has not evolved significantly. On the other hand, with regard to the economic and financial governance at the world level, I want to announce that the process of the membership of Africa as a full member of G20 is moving in the right direction, following the steps that have been taken in that direction after I took over as chairman of the African Union. To date, more than 20 members of the G20 have expressed openly and publicly their support, and in the chronological order: European Union through the Council of Europe, Charles Michel; France; South Africa; China; Russia; Saudi Arabia; the United States of America; Japan; Turkey; and Great Britain. On your behalf, I would like to reiterate our heartfelt gratitude for this brotherly and support Africa will remember. We hope the other members of the group will also join this consensus so that the membership of Africa become a reality at the next summit of the G20 in India. Other challenges, in fact, requires that we take them up. At the initiative of G20 on the suspension of the debt servicing and the reallocation of the special drawing rights, one or the other, in fact, supports our efforts of resilience and economic recovery, though it is still in a kind of limbo in past. I'm talking of the energy transition, which should allow us to exploit and use our own natural resources in order to meet our needs of industrialization at competitive prices and costs, and to ensure that our countries have access to electricity where 600 million or more people do not have access to electricity. I'm thinking of the exaggerated perception of risks of investment in Africa. In my address, in my statement when I took over in February 2022, I said our economies are underfinanced. They are badly and poorly financed. Our countries continue to pay unjustly and unfairly very high interest rates because of an unequal and inequitable system that prevails. And this has been confirmed by many studies, and the report of 2022 on the sustainable development financing in April 2022, which pointed out in explicit terms the severe way that Africa is treated in their noting and rating by the industrialized countries. I'm not saying it is the report that states it. So in this full swing of the pandemic, with more than 32 economies of African countries that were assessed by at least one of the major agencies, 18 out of 32 had a rating that was degraded. That is, we have an average, a world average of 31%, whereas Africa is noted to be more or less than 15. The countries that have seen the increase in the debt because of the pandemic, the war, and which have seen an economic slowdown, have in fact escaped and have been spared this degradation. Well, we have abundant financing in the market, yet this is still quoted from report 2022. Then the defiance of the rating agencies and the initiative of suspending the debt servicing, which was decided consensually by G20, which is the organ that is empowered in this matter. Many African countries have seen their rating being scrutinized even before their participation in the initiative of this suspension of debt servicing, which naturally contributed to worsen the perception of risk in these countries and brought down their rating, and these agencies have become the regulatory organs. It is for this reason the report recommends the adoption of a transparent methodology in order not to undermine the trust. I recall, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, that this study, which is a kind of authority which has been led by some 60 multilateral institutions, including the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the Basel Committee, and the Bank Supervision, and the International Regulatory Association, and the Council of Financial Stability. All this shows that all our development efforts cannot prosper unless and until some rules and practices are ended. And Mr. Secretary General of the United Nations, you are right. Yes, we have the primary responsibility of establishing the necessary development conditions of our countries. But our fate depends also on institutions and rules and regulations which have been established after the war, which does not take into account the needs and the interests of our countries. I consequently appeal to the member states of the Union and the Commission to contribute actively to the breakdown that is for the financial paradigm, and between the meetings of the Fund and COP28, and which will be convened in December. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, at the end of my term, I would like to express all my gratitude for the trust you place in me. And I thank the heads of state, the colleagues, and I particularly thank our brother Musa Faki Mahamat for his leadership and his support, and also all the members of the Commission and all the authorities of the African institutions. To serve our continent has been a privilege and a great source of pride, because I believe in a united Africa, an Africa that is standing, an Africa which is at work, an Africa which is at peace, and which has trust in its own future. And this makes me more resolved to continue making the advocacy of the continent everywhere and all the time. Because it is a responsibility that we have inherited from Pan-Africanism in order to fulfill the dream of the founding fathers and the aspirations of our peoples. And I thank you for your kind attention, and I wish full success to our deliberations and full success to my successor, my friend and brother, the President Assoumani of the Comoros, who is also my marabout, says the President. Long live Africa, long live African Union. I thank you.
President Macky Sall, President of the Republic of Senegal, current President of the African Union, for the year 2022, Your Excellency, Prime Minister of the Federal Republic of Ethiopia, Excellency, Secretary General of the United Nations, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor in our capacity as General Dean, in conformity with the rules of procedure of the Assembly, to read out to you the membership or composition of the Bureau of the Assembly of the African Union for 2022. For the chair of 2023, chair the Eastern region, the Union of Comoros. First Vice President, Northern region. Consultations are still ongoing. Second Vice President, the Southern region, the Republic of Botswana. Third Vice President, the Central region, the Republic of Burundi. Rapporteur for the Bureau of the Assembly, the Republic of Senegal for the Western region. So here is, ladies and gentlemen, Excellency, Mr. President, the membership or composition of the Bureau for mandate of the year 2023. I thank you for your kind attention.
I now invite His Excellency President Macky Sall of the Republic of Senegal and Chairperson of the African Union to deliver his handover statement.
Merci beaucoup.
I thank you. On behalf of the Assembly of the African Union and in my personal name, I would like to greet and congratulate the new chairman of the Union, our brother Azali Assoumani, President of the Union of Comoros, and the members for being elected. I hope that the northern region will reach consensus as soon as possible. I wish them full success in the exercise of their mandate. This is a delicate task considering the continental and international context, but we are quite confident in their capacity to achieve this mission on behalf of our Union and as part of the spirit of this 36th Summit on the acceleration of the implementation of the AFCFTA. This is a great challenge which requires the mobilization of all beyond the presidents and members of the Bureau. I would like, on my part, to express my commitment to work together with President Azali and all the colleagues in this direction. I wish now, Mr. President, transfer to you the chair by renewing to you our wishes and prayers, and would like to invite you to get closer to your seat or to get seated in your seat.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I now humbly invite His Excellency Mr. Azali Assoumani, President of the Union of the Comoros and Chairperson of the African Union, to deliver his acceptance statement. Your Excellency.
Majesté,
Your Majesties, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state and government, dear colleagues, Excellencies, Secretary Generals of the United Nations and the League of Arab States, Excellency Prime Minister of Palestine, Excellency Moussa Faki, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, ladies and gentlemen, ministers, ladies and gentlemen, ambassadors and heads of delegation, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. I would like on the outset to express, first of all, on your behalf and on behalf of all Africa, our heartfelt condolences and our profound compassion to the brotherly peoples of Turkey and Syria following the deadly earthquakes that hit their countries, causing hundreds of thousands of victims and major loss of property. I would like you and invite you, ladies and gentlemen, to join us to observe 1 minute of silence in memory of those who have disappeared. Thank you. Thank you. I would like then to express with great emotion my very sincere thanks and gratitude to members of the Bureau of the African Union who have honored my country, the Union of Comoros, by entrusting it for the first time of its history the destiny of our continental organization. I would like also to thank my dear colleagues, sisters and brothers from Eastern Africa for supporting my candidature to this noble function, and most particularly my dear brother, President William Ruto, who had the elegance of withdrawing the candidature of his country, Kenya, which allows today the historical accession of the Union of Comoros to this noble function. And I'm even more pleased with this honor that my country is an incarnation embodiment of an island, as an island country has late access to its independence, allowing the Union of Comoros to lead the African continent. Our organization has proved to the world its conviction that all countries have the same rights and enjoy the same freedoms. Thus, by succeeding within this house to my brother, President Macky Sall, in my capacity as President of the African Union, it is with the weight of continental responsibility on my shoulders that I intend to assume, as of today, the functions of President of the African Union on the occasion of this 36th ordinary session. But I will do my best to pursue his work by favoring, as he always did, dialogue, listening, gathering prerequisites in order to make of this mandate that of the success of our continent. Allow me then to express, on behalf of all the delegations here, our profound gratitude to the high authorities of Ethiopia, its people, and government for the warm welcome and hospitality which has always been extended to us in this beautiful city of Addis Ababa. This new flower, whose perfume has always spread throughout the continent, spread the perfume of our common ambitions for our common motherland, Africa. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to seize this opportunity to salute the memory of the founding fathers of Africa, Nkrumah, Leopold Sedar Senghor, Sékou Touré, Bhutto Keita, Kenneth Kaunda, Sibaron Pio, and others. Certainly times have changed, but these models of ideology which embody the African ideal continue to inspire our thoughts, our actions, and the march forward. Within this spirit, I would like also to pay tribute to all those who have contributed in 1999 to the elaboration of the Sirt Declaration, which has laid the foundations for a modern African Union, which would be visible, eligible, and audible, which would have at its helm a moral authority embodied by a current president. It is this authority which President Macky Sall has borne with great insight during the last 12 months. Dear Macky, you have worked without respite for the defense of the interests of our continent in political, economic, and financial world governance. You have succeeded in creating consensus around the accession of the African Union to the rank of full-fledged member in the G20. Thank you, dear Macky, for this achievement which honors us and continues to honor the African continent in its entirety. Would like also to thank our dear brother, His Excellency Moussa Faki, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, and all his collaborators for the continuous work and their remarkable investment in favor of our organization. Honorable participants, the world and our countries in particular are going through a troubled period at several levels, while our countries have just come out of the most serious crisis, COVID-19. They are facing the consequences of this new crisis, that is the war between Russia and Ukraine. In 2022, growth has not gone beyond 3%, while birth rate in Africa are still very high, absorbing the efforts that are being made by countries in terms of social transfer and infrastructure. 22 countries in Africa, according to the World Bank, are in a situation of distress because of their debt, and they dedicate a great share of $1,000 billion to pay the debt of the continent. We do urge the setting up of a common framework for the settlement of this debt, which would be more inclusive and will integrate the multilateral, bilateral, and private creditors. And we do hail in this sense, in this vein, the important role which the General Director of the IMF has played, who has supported over the years African countries, particularly in terms of management, the restructuring of the debt, but also in terms of coordination between bilateral creditors through the initiative of suspension of the debt servicing and the common framework. We plead for a total cancelling of the African debt in order to allow an economic recovery after COVID-19 and allow us to face the negative impacts of the crisis in Ukraine. This multiform crisis generates also food insecurity, which is a source of concern because of its seriousness. It threatens of setting back our continent to scenarios of famine, of unequal, which has never been seen before. The insufficiency of our capital, human capital, education, health, but also access to water and electricity. Africa could see its gains be put into question for 20 years. There is necessity for concerted policies at the national, regional, international level in order to create a virtuous movement which will allow us to get out of the rut. If the water has broken down in Europe, this is risking of ruining our continent. And in the face of this critical situation, and as we did during the health crisis of COVID-19, solidarity should always prevail. I would like then to invite our European partners to mobilize massively the partnership fund of 150 billion euros, which have been set up during the summit between the African Union and the European Union of February 2022 to support our continent. And I intend to express this legitimate demand to the President of the European Council, who has always displayed his attachment to the development of our continent. Ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, as part of the responsibilities, of my responsibilities, I'm intending on important questions which are being faced by our continent to set myself an essential mission which constitutes the theme of the year, namely the acceleration of the implementation of the AFCFTA. We do place collectively our hope on this AFCFTA, which our organization has launched in 2021, which could provide adequate solutions to our problems. Moreover, thanks to the impulse of the Summit of the African Union on economic diversification in Africa and the extraordinary summit on the AFCFTA, the 25 of May 2022, this AFCFTA is set up and has been ratified by 46 African countries, and urge my peers who have not done so to do so very rapidly. So it is up to each of our states to create the normative conditions so that this exceptional tool could serve as a lever to intra-African trade and to its development, because now there are only 17% of trade among African countries and only 4% of the contribution of Africa in the world trade. So the AFCFTA, without these conditions, Africa will join a list of missed opportunities. We cannot allow this, because our peoples and our enterprises are waiting with a lot of patience the implementation of Agenda 2063. Honorable participants, we should, as you have entrusted me, that accelerate the implementation of the CFTA. But I think that there are three elements that we should focus on in order to achieve this mission: peace and security, the climate change problem, and also African self-sufficiency. We must grant a great importance to peace and security, and most particularly endeavor to consolidate them through prevention and negotiation. Our continent is still facing numerous internal conflicts, and this has tainted the confidence in the capacity of institutions to prevent them and end them, with the consequences they generate. The evaluation of this internal conflict since independence has attained a very important figure. Today, 36 million African migrants, who constitute 40% of the displaced persons in the world. Beyond the problems that the loss of members of the family from the exiled person, the logistic consequences, and also challenges in terms of security. We know indeed that if human distress and despair, which constitute one of the grounds to support as much as possible the efforts that have been undertaken by the Peace and Security Council for the prevention of conflicts, and also the support of peacekeeping forces. And here I would like to salute my brother Abi for the efforts that he has made, and this is a good example for us. I would like also to contribute and see to it that the African Union be a committed player in the service of peace, because multilateralism also rests on the principle of equity. I will also be the spokesperson of more than 1 billion Africans in order to work without respite in favor of the right of our continent to sit permanently in the United Nations Security Council. And I would like to reassure you, Prime Minister of Palestine, that the problem of Palestine and Israel will be our priority in order for these two states to live in peace side by side, and as Jerusalem, the capital of Palestine. We must also endeavor with more energy to the climate change question, so that although Africa is only responsible about 3% of gas emissions, climate change affects very hard the life of our continent. It prints its mark on a number of conflicts related to water resources. On this very important issue of climate change, the African Union should continue to make its voice heard in the community of nations, as it did during the COP27, thanks to our champion, President Macky Sall. Our continent should also prepare itself for the next COP, which will take place in the Arab United Emirates, in order for us to have a good project to put on the table and defend, and also in order to protect the African continent and the island states in Africa from, as concerns this problem of climate. I would like to seize this opportunity in order to play a deserved tribute to island states of which my country is part, because thanks to the advocacy of the states, Africa remembered also that it had 26,000 kilometers of coast and has achieved its contribution to our security, our food sovereignty. It became also aware that blue economy of Africa should generate dozens of thousands of dollars from now to 2030, which will represent a very important share of the GDP during the next UN conference, which will be dedicated to the Great Blue Wall. Our organization will be represented by our organization, and concrete proposals in this area will be presented for the future of our people. As chairperson of the African Union, I will be at the front line of this fight. We must also recognize that if this fight is supported by the digital technology, which is unavoidable, our capacity will also be strengthened. We must also see to it that we promote the self-sufficiency of our continent. It is not normal for Africa to be largely dependent on external imports, despite all the human and natural wealth that it has. Our continent could and should give itself means to be able to transform and store these products, and in order to satisfy the statistics according to which Africa is able to become the food basket of the world. Just like COVID, the crisis between Russia and Ukraine has shown the need for Africa to get out of the cycle of dependency through the promotion of agricultural production, and particularly going in the direction of the Dakar Declaration on food sovereignty and resilience. We must multiply our work, our efforts with the international community, and particularly the ADB, which is prepared to support Africa and reinforce also the capacities of our countries in this important area, which is agriculture. Allow me here to pay a tribute to the work which has been done by our brother Adesina has always accomplished in this area. But we must also get our youth interested into agriculture, which has a great potential and which will allow our country to overcome poverty, famine, and dependency. It is then essential and busy those youth in order to prevent them from becoming hostages of extremists who threaten peace and stability in our countries through terrorist actions. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Africa is facing huge challenges. We will be in a few years 3 billion inhabitants on this continent, which did not reach 1 billion in the year 2000. It is for us to draw up the perspectives and provide solutions for Africa to become prosperous. So let's act for the prosperity and the reinforcement of women's rights, who are women who give life. Ensure the education of women, the transmission of family and cultural values, and occupy a greater position in the creation of wealth on our continent. Women who deserve that we get more involved in the efforts which are deployed by our organization in order for them to achieve the same rights as men, and also for their self-empowerment. And this is why it is important to coordinate our actions in this direction, and particularly the harmonization of our policies on gender. Majesty, ladies and gentlemen, it will be remiss not to express and pay a tribute to our colleagues, the champions, who are championing the cause of Africa by endeavoring to achieve the mission that they have been assigned with. Please give them a round of applause. Before concluding my statement, I would like to assure you that the defense and the promotion of the interests of our continent will be
the main endeavor of my mission. On your behalf, Majesty, ladies and gentlemen, I have no doubt that we will be able together to write a new page of the history of our organization. Long live Africa, long live African Union, long live international solidarity. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we now have 2 items left on our agenda. Next on the agenda is the launch of the theme of the year 2023. In this connection, may I humbly invite His Excellency Mr. Wamukele, Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area, to come to the podium and guide the proceedings on this item. Thank you.
Your Excellency, President Azali Assoumani, President of the Union of the Comoros and Chairperson of the African Union, Your Excellency, Dr. Abiy Ahmed, Prime Minister of the Republic of Ethiopia, Your Excellencies, Heads of States and Government, Your Excellency Musa Faki Mahamat, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Your Excellency, Prime Minister of the State of Palestine, Your Excellencies, our former heads of states who are here with us today, Your Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellency Ahmed Abul Gheit, Secretary General of the League of Arab States, the Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Dr. Nsanza Baganwa. Let me start by expressing gratitude to the Assembly of Heads of States and Government for their unwavering commitment and support to the African Continental Free Trade Area and to ensuring that it becomes a reality. It was last year in February during the 35th Ordinary Session that you approved the African Union theme for the year 2023 to be, and I quote, acceleration of AfCFTA implementation, end quote. The theme of the year coincides with the 60th commemoration of the establishment of the Organization of African Unity in this historic city of Addis Ababa. 60 years after our founding mothers and fathers established the OAU, the AfCFTA presents itself as a tool to be deployed by the African Union to position Africa to adequately respond to the challenges of our time. The public health crisis from which the continent is emerging, and of course, the food insecurity crisis that is attributable to the current geopolitical context. In the area of public health, the concluded protocol on intellectual property rights, which the Assembly will adopt today, is an important instrument that has the potential to address Africa's public health and industrial development imperatives. To address the food insecurity crisis, the Council of Ministers of Trade resolved to develop a strategy for boosting intra-Africa trade in agricultural products, an important outcome of the recently convened meeting
አርስተ ዜና 36ኛ የአፍሪካ ኅብረት የመሪዎች ስብሰባ በአዲስ አበባ ተጀመረ።